You ever see a news story that just seems to pop up out of nowhere? You know, a chemical leak, an evacuation, a protest? But here's the thing, what looks like the start of a story is usually just the latest chapter in a much, much longer one. All right, so let's get right into it. I want you to just imagine this for a second. You're in Sarnia, Ontario. Your phone buzzes, and you see an alert from your community leaders. It's not a test. It's a real, urgent warning to evacuate your home because of toxic gas from a plant nearby. And this isn't some made-up scenario. This is the reality the Mjiwanging First Nation has had to face. I mean, that's a scary situation, right? And it makes you wonder, especially since this wasn't the first time. So the big question is, why? Why does this keep happening? And the answer? Well, it's not just about some chemical leak. It goes way, way deeper. It's about history, it's about justice, and it's about whose voice actually gets heard. So to really wrap our heads around what's going on in places like Amjiwanang, we've got to talk about this really important idea, one that ties the health of our environment directly to fairness and quality. Basically, environmental justice boils down to a pretty simple idea. No single community should have to carry an unfair burden of pollution. But, way too often, it's the low-income communities, the marginalized communities that end up living right next to the refineries, the landfills, all the stuff nobody else wants in their backyard. Okay, but here's where things get even more complex. For Indigenous peoples in Canada, this whole conversation, it's about more than just equal protection. It's about something much more fundamental. And this slide really lays out the crucial difference. See, on one side, you have the mainstream environmental justice movement. A lot of the time, they're fighting for a seat at the table, right? To be included in the existing system. But Indigenous environmental justice, that's different. It's not about joining the table, it's about questioning the table itself. It's about recognizing Indigenous communities as sovereign nations with their own rights to their own land. It's a total paradigm shift. So that begs the question, right? How did we get here? Why are some communities so much more vulnerable in the first place? To get that, we have to go back and look at a really painful piece of Canadian history. 150,000, that's the number. At a minimum, that's how many First Nation, Métis, and Inuit children were taken from their homes, from their families, and forced into residential schools. And behind that huge number, you have 150,000 individual stories. Stories of incredible trauma. Kids who were punished just for speaking their own language, who were told to be ashamed of who they were. Just listen to this quote from Paul Dixon, a survivor. He said, "If one child was caught crying, everybody was in trouble." It's just heartbreaking, and it shows you the kind of cruelty that was built right into the system. And let's be super clear here. None of this was by accident. This was official policy. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission laid it all out. The entire point of these schools was to Christianize and civilize, to stamp out Indigenous languages and governments, basically to erase an entire culture. The goal was forced assimilation. And this isn't some distant black and white history. The very last residential school didn't close until the 1990s. Think about that. So this legacy of breaking up families, of taking away power, of cutting people off from their land, it directly created the vulnerable situations that we see today. It's a straight line. Okay, so out of this history, we see two really powerful movements for justice start to take shape. And what's wild is when you put them side by side, you see they're talking about a lot of the same things. So on one side, you've got the demands from the environmental justice movement. And these are, pretty fundamental rights that you'd think every community should have. The right to know what's in your air and water, the right to be protected from harm, and the right to get some kind of compensation when things go wrong. And then, on the other side, look at the big themes from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action. They're talking about self-determination, community control, getting justice for all that historical harm. When you boil it down, both movements are really asking for the same thing, the right to a safe, healthy future on their own terms. And that brings us full circle, right back to that evacuation notice in Amjiwanang. Only now, hopefully, we're seeing it with a lot more context. So this was the official statement from the company responsible for the emissions. We sincerely appreciate the community's patience and understanding. I mean, listen to that language, patience and understanding. It's so corporate, so detached from the reality of families having to grab their kids and leave their homes because the air isn't safe to breathe. And that's the key thing to remember. For the people of Amjiwanang, and for so many other Indigenous communities, All these ideas we've been talking about, sovereignty, assimilation, justice, they aren't just words in a history book. This is their life, today, right now. This isn't a story about the past, it's a fight for the present. And so all of this leaves us with a really big, really important question. We hear the word reconciliation a lot in Canada, but what does it actually mean? When a community is still facing harm today, harm that's directly connected to this long history of dispossession, what does reconciliation really demand from us? It kind of suggests it's not enough to just say sorry for the past. It means we have to be committed to justice right here in the present.